Chris Duncan. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at St. Louis University. St. Louis University, for those of you who may not know, is a Catholic Jesuit institution founded in 1818. The College of Arts and Sciences is the oldest and the largest college at St. Louis University with over 2,000 students. The College of Arts and Sciences studies everything from the most microscopic pieces of matter to the human person, social and political institutions that human beings are involved in, to the creative impulses and arts, all the way up to the philosophical and the eternal questions of life. And so in the College of Arts and Sciences, we try and provide a holistic education for our students, body, mind, and spirit. I am so thrilled to have all of you here on campus. There's probably no group right now in our society that I believe is under more stress and strain than the people who are involved in journalism. When I think about the communication department here at SLU, and I think about what they study, like how people communicate, why people communicate, and for me probably now, and most importantly, how people ought to communicate. What are the ethics of the way in which we engage one another? Because if you've been paying much attention lately to the national discourse and to the media as it stands, we are suffering a huge deficit in this area. Journalists, from where I sit, have a unique responsibility in a free and democratic society. On your absolutely best days, you are called to be the conscience of that society. You're called to hold up a mirror to the powerful. You're called to hold up a light in the areas of the world that are dark. You're called to bring to our attention where we are falling short, as well as where we are succeeding. One of my favorite quotes comes from Bob Marley. Some of you probably have no idea who Bob Marley is. Bob Marley, a famous reggae singer in Jamaica, also a political activist. And back during the Civil Wars in Jamaica, Bob Marley was asked to perform a concert. And Bob Marley said, absolutely, he's going to try and bring the people together, right? Bob Marley was a man who was all about love and justice. And before this concert, the political rivals, right, got very nervous that this was a partisan move on the part of the government, that they were trying to co-opt Bob Marley. And so one of the people in the opposition parties shot Bob Marley. Now, fortunately, Bob Marley lived. And as he was laying there, wounded, he said, the concert tomorrow will go on. And people said to him, but Bob, you were just shot. How can you possibly perform tomorrow? And Bob Marley said this. He said, the people trying to bring darkness to the world are not going to take a day off, and so neither can the people who are trying to bring the light. I call on everyone in this room who wants to make this their craft, their profession, to be a bringer of light. Sometimes that light will be harsh. Sometimes that light will be glaring. Sometimes that light will make people uncomfortable. Good. Our task is not to comfort the comfortable. Our task is to discomfort the comfortable in a world in which people are suffering, in which crimes are being committed, in which atrocities are being committed, in which lies are being told, in which people are not being held to account. Do not become an enabler. Become the conscience of your society. Use your words. Use your pictures. Use your electronic media to bring the light. It's a real pleasure to have all of you here at St. Louis University. And on behalf of the Department of Communication and the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as the entire administration, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope your conversations are rich. And I hope that you will return and talk to us about what it might mean to be a student at St. Louis University. If you really want to come back and you want to talk about not only journalism, but political science, you come see me, we can take a class together, we can talk about all kinds of fun stuff. So again, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan. All right, so we've got a few announcements here, just some housekeeping items that we'll get out of the way first. First off, Wi-Fi. If you were looking to connect to Wi-Fi, you might have noticed there's a SLU guest. That is where you can connect. It does require an additional login step of either using logging in through social media or to send a code through text message. Either way works. So you can log into that, use the Wi-Fi. When you're connected then, if you haven't done so already, you're welcome to download the program app, the GAP app, as it's unfortunately known. The code is jSTL 2017, so you can download our program. All right, so first off, a few notes of thank you. We want to thank St. Louis University and the School of Communication, specifically Sherry Hahn, Lindsay Gibson, who are here with us today, and the chair of the School of Communication, April Trees. They've been doing a great job, so let's give them a round of applause. All right. As a general reminder, of course, I don't think this needs to be said, but we'll say it anyway. Please be respectful of everyone here. Remember, you're representing yourself, your school, your media staff. Please keep the campus clean. Thanks for folks who are cleaning up those little paper tabs that were left over on name tags and the wristbands and everything, for getting that stuff thrown in trash. When we have lunch, we'll be back here in this building, so for folks who are staying for lunch with us, make sure that you clean up after lunch as well. Speaking of lunch, please make sure you got your wristband on. That's your ticket. Also, we had it up out front, but we'll have it in here at lunchtime. We do have a collection box for the Student Press Law Center, and so we encourage you to drop in whatever you can so we can make a donation, again, to the SPLC, because we know they do great work for us all the time, especially right now as they are currently working with legislators to pass the New Voices Act to grant you guys, to cure Hazelwood here in St. Louis and in Missouri. Advisors, our meeting in the hospitality room, if you hadn't quite figured that out, if you go through these glass doors, it's to the left, Suite 124. It's an immediate left again to room 124A, which is our meeting room, and that's where we are. There's some coffee and pastries in there, and during session 2, that's when we'll have our meeting for advisors. Okay, so at this point, we're ready for our keynote. And if you haven't heard the story, it was a little bit of an adventure yesterday. So our keynote speaker is Maira Garcia from the New York Times. She is the digital news editor for the Culture Department. She serves as a planning editor for daily web coverage and major news events, and oversees the department's digital workflow and its social media. She joined the Times in 2012. Prior to the Times, Maira was the social media editor at the Austin American-Statesman, where she managed the newspaper's social media accounts and developed strategies for reporting and for audience growth. She has also worked at a local news startup, a publishing company, and is a contributor to MTV's 2008 Choose or Lose election coverage. Maira graduated from Texas State University with an MA in New Media and a BA in Print Journalism and Political Science. And you notice there's nobody coming to the stage with me right now. So if you've been paying attention, you know that New York got hit with a massive snowstorm yesterday. And Maira spent quite a bit of time at the airport and had about 7 flights changed and canceled on her before, unfortunately, it was canceled altogether. Thankfully, technology being what it is, we have her remotely. So, at this time, I believe Maira will be here. Well, Maira will be coming with us short. Here she is. All right.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you all for being here this morning, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. It's probably a lot nicer there than it is here right now. I can show you really quickly what my flight looked like. So that's what I was waiting in yesterday. It wasn't very fun, but again, thank you so much for having me. And let me go back to me on the screen here. Okay. Let me just start off by saying that you a little bit about what it is I do and basically how I help our newsroom work. I spend a lot of time thinking about how our work appears online. I think about what headline it should have. I think about whether there are enough photos or videos for an article. Do we have a GIF for it? Should I make one? Can we use it on our homepage? Will you see it on our mobile app? If somebody asks me that yes, we need all those things, well, next thing I know, I'm on Photoshop and I'm making those. Another thing I think a lot about is, what time a story should be published on the web. Should it be at 5 a.m. so the East Coast can see it? Should it be at 10 a.m. for California? 3 a.m. for London? While we're thinking about that, should we also translate it into Spanish, into Mandarin, or any other language while we're thinking about who in the world we want to read this story? I also think about what words should be used on Twitter and Facebook. Should we consider asking one of our reporters, who happens to be at a museum covering something, to also take a tour on Snapchat so people there can see what it is they're doing? Sometimes I also think about what words should appear on your phone if you have the New York Times mobile app on your phone and news happens. So why do I do those things? And there are a few reasons why. One, there's so many different places for people to get their news now. We have to stay competitive, which means we have to show and tell people to us for the news because we have it first and we have it right. So we're pretty well known as one of the top organizations in the United States, but it doesn't matter. We still need to earn your trust. We still need to think about how it is we're presenting to the news to you. And you know what? It's also not just news organizations that we have to worry about. Because you can get news on a computer, your phone, even your watch. We have to think about the ways and the places that readers get their news. Some people get their news on Twitter. Some people get their news on Facebook or Snapchat even. So part of my job is to make sure people who have read our stories, watched our videos, looked at our pictures, keep coming back, whether that's on their phone, through Facebook, or any other place they might find us. The other part of it is to get people who have never heard of us to find us. Then we have to get them to come back. Another reason is because our survival depends on it. Yes, we publish a newspaper, we have a website, and a mobile app, but we also have so much more. All of those things require a lot of work and a lot of people. It's very expensive to make these things happen, especially when we want to cover the world. And we do, in fact, cover the world. So people have to pay to read us. You've probably been to news sites where you don't have to pay anything to read their stories. And, for that matter, the first 10 stories that you get from us, you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to log in. You can just read them. But the reason we ask people to pay to read our articles is because we work really hard to provide the truth. We also talk to people that many other news organizations don't have access to. Maybe that's the president, an athlete, or a celebrity. Or maybe those people will only talk to us at the New York Times because they trust us and know that we will get the story right. So my job basically didn't exist 10 years ago, not even 5 years ago. In fact, my job was just made about 7 months ago. The roles you hear most about from the press is maybe editor, reporter, photographer. The definition of those roles has changed so much, especially at a place like the New York Times. We're not just a newspaper, we're a media organization. We have people who take photos, who shoot video, who write stories, people who create these amazing interactives using code and graphics, people who crunch numbers for us in our polling unit, people who put all of those things together. I think it's really, really important that you know that there are different kinds of roles for journalists. I think, and the reason I say that too is because I don't think I really knew that when I was in high school and I was a journalism student and I was learning about journalism and thought it might be something I wanted to go into. So it's not just writing and editing, it's so much more than that. So the department I work in
well, we have new technology. Oh, I think we're getting it back.
Sorry about that. Here we go. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And hopefully they all will. So this particular video that I'm trying to show right now is an in-depth look at how Justin Bieber made a song with Diplo and Skrillex. It took about 10 people to put this together. The reporter had to interview Bieber, Diplo, and Skrillex, and we had graphics people put the illustrations on there. We had somebody record the video and the audio. We had someone write a story about it. So let me show you a clip of this really quickly. Okay, just checking to see if I'm still there.
We got you.
Okay. How much of that did you guys catch?
I think we got it all.
Okay, great. That's just an example of something that we make here. Other items that we cover sometimes come at the nexus of what's happening in the world and new experiences that our readers want to know about. So one example is the National Museum of African American History. And let me show you guys this slide again one more time. So the museum opened up last year in Washington, D.C., and we were able to see it before it even opened. We wanted to give readers a look at how it was organized and what it contained. It began with items like shackles that were were used on slaves. It also had this powerful story of how a man who inherited Harriet Tubman's hymnal decided to donate it to the museum. And it winds down with even more recent artifacts like this Trayvon Martin protest sign. So part of what we did as well was we did sort of like this graphic tour of parts of the museum so people can almost feel like they're there. And I think that's really important that we not just tell these stories that are really, have an impact and are newsworthy, but we also show people that this is what it looks like if you can't get to Washington, D.C. So this is one of the newer things that we do. Now, this one in particular doesn't relate to my department, but I just wanted to give you a recent example, so recent as yesterday. So what you see here are a series of notifications that we write and send to the people who have our app downloaded on their phones. So it starts, let's see, the first one from 7-Eleven, it's snowing, but it may snow a little less than we thought. Here's what you need to know about subways, schools, and staying in. The one at the very top, we have this museum guide that we published this week, and one of the museums that opened up was the Museum for Women, or about women, and it's one of the first, it is the first in the country, so we thought it was important that readers know about this. So we kind of try to have fun with it too. So in America, there are museums devoted to spies, to roller skating, and to Bigfoot. Now there will be one for women too. So this is a real job. There are people who write these things. It's not the whole job, obviously, but it's an important part of the job. And the goal of this is we want to sound like your smart friend. We want to sound like your friend who sends you a text message and tells you what you need to know. So now that I've shared with you guys what I do directly, I want to talk a little bit about what the New York Times does as an organization. So these days we talk a lot about truth. And this past year has shown us that the truth really matters. We live in a time where facts are being questioned, where the term fake news has become a constant refrain. But what does that term really mean? What does fake news mean? There are a few things we have to think about here. There are stories that are completely made up, which we can call that fake news. There are stories that might be based on facts, but perhaps those stories promote a certain point of view or a bias. Then there are stories that actually do share a particular point of view, so like opinion articles. So a recent study found, the study was done by the Pew Research Center, found that 23% of people had shared a fake news story. That's almost 1 out of 4 people. So if you think about your favorite social media site, or even a messaging service that your friends use. So on this site, you have 20 friends that you talk to on a regular basis, you read their posts, whatever. That means 5 of those friends are telling you something that isn't true. You may not know it isn't true right away, but because it's your friend and because you trust them, you're going to tell 20 other of your friends, and oh look, this is what my friend sent to me, isn't this interesting news? And then they share it with their friends, and before you know it, everyone is ready. So some people, start pointing out that, oh, maybe this isn't true, but then other people say it is true. So where does the truth lie, and how do we figure that out? So a lot of you guys grew up with the internet, and this is going to make me sound like super old, because we got the internet in my house when I was probably like 17, so I'm dating myself here. computer or a tablet at home. If you don't have one, you certainly more than likely have the other. And you guys, I'm sure, like, know about social media and use it, whether that's Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, you know, what have you. And I bet some of you guys use social media that someone like me hasn't even heard about. In fact, you can tell me about them because I need to tell my bosses that I learned something today too. So, with all of that being said, because I know you guys are smart, but a study conducted at Stanford University found that despite all this information that you have access to and that you receive through all these different mediums and devices, some of you don't know what makes something trustworthy or real. And it's not just you guys too, like I'm not trying to be ageist in any way, because I think this certainly is true across the board. You have to learn the difference between news organizations that are out there reporting real facts, organizations that want to share a particular point of view, and organizations that are literally some person on their couch in another country who's trying to make money off of a crazy article with a crazy headline, because every time you and your friends click on it, they get paid for the advertisements you see on the page. So let's talk about stories that are completely made up. In other words, fake news, as we said before. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and show you this. I think it's fair to say that the story on the left is not real. Sorry, the former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton did not adopt an alien baby. I think the story is crazy enough that we're all smart enough to understand that this is totally not real. So this is one extreme. So let me show you another fake news story, if you will. You know, there are stories that you don't know aren't true because even high-quality news organizations make mistakes. Because they didn't ask them enough questions, because they didn't realize the person they were writing the story about wasn't telling the truth. So this story on the left that you see here is, and the boy in the photo, this is Mohammed Islam. He was a junior in high school when this story ran in New York Magazine in 2014. And just to provide some disambiguation, New York Magazine is not tied to the New York Times. And I'm not trying to pick on them either, but just this is a prominent example. So this teenager, he was rumored to have made $72 million trading stocks. And it turned out that he totally made this story up. And the reporters and editors there admitted that they were duped. I think what happened, if I recall correctly, was that a member of his family read the story and was like, what are you talking about? Like, sorry, my nephew didn't make $72 million, as cool as that would be, sounds. You know, sometimes an incredible story is too incredible, and it's because it isn't true. And so, I mean, you as a reporter, as an editor, you have to ask yourself that question. Is it too crazy, too incredible? And, you have to talk to different people to make sure it's true. And unfortunately, this was a case where it simply wasn't. So if you read the magazine article, you'll see now that there's about a paragraph at the top of it explaining the correction and what happened and how they found out the story was not true. So this is a chart that I found on a BuzzFeed article that was, here are the 50 biggest fake news hits on Facebook from 2016. And, some of the stories on this chart are, I would say they're controversial and also sort of loaded in terms of politics. and we just had an election that was, I think, extremely divisive for our country, and because a lot of it also played out on social media, there were things that were spread that I think as Americans, as journalists, as consumers of news, we realized were just completely untrue. So there's this professor named Melissa Zimdars. She works at a college in Massachusetts, and she made this Google Doc called False, Misleading, Clickbaity, and Satirical News Sources. It talks about how you can identify stories that might have those elements and how you can find credible and reliable sources. So the articles that you see on this graphic have a lot of those elements that she talks about. If you look at the URLs in red here that are listed on this particular graphic, you see abcnews.com.co. So ABC News as an organization, we know that exists. You know, they're on your cable channel lineup. You may have seen their website. You may have seen their stories posted on social media. But there's something that's suspect here, and this is something you have to take into account whenever you're reading news online. So this .co here at the end, abcnews.com is what abcnews.com, like there's no .co. So like whenever you see these sorts of things, like think about the news organization, is it real? Is this a real website? And sometimes that takes a little bit digging, and it's not so obvious. And as news consumers, that's part of your role. You have to think about where these articles come from, and are they in fact real? So further down here, you see this FBI agent suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide by the Denver Guardian. The Denver Guardian does not exist as a real news organization. There is an organization called The Guardian that's based out of the UK. They have offices here in New York too, but there isn't actual news organization named Denver Guardian. This bottom one's more a little bit of my time. Rage Against the Machine, some of you might know, is a metal act from the 90s that supposedly they were going to reunite and release this anti-Trump album, which isn't true. Like, these guys have not been a band for like a couple decades maybe now, and there's like no chance of them ever coming back together. So you just have to think about, like, you know, if it's too crazy to be true, then it may be just that. So now let's talk about stories that are shared that have a particular point of view. Those are opinion articles. The Times publishes some of those as well. But it's also done with very explicit terms, stating exactly what they are. So how serious are we about keeping opinion out of our articles? So, you know, everything we do has to be backed up by a source and attributed. We do use anonymous sources, however, that doesn't mean that the reporter or editor has no idea who they are. There are certain standards in place to make sure that we're not just publishing things that are, you know, completely made up. So I'm sure your teachers have talked to you about telling people who said what in a story when you write it. You have to tell people who said what, and you have to tell people where that information came from. Whether that's a study, or a police officer, or the mayor, or, you know, just a citizen that you happen to interview for your article. It's important to tell people who they are, or where that information comes from. And, you know, at the same time too, as you're talking to these sources, you make them aware, like, hey, I'm publishing this, and you know, I need to know who you are. and why it's okay to put you in the story. And sometimes that's a little more nuanced too. So when it comes to opinion again, like at the Times, we even go so far as to have our opinion department sit several floors away from us in the newsroom. So we take the division of news and opinion so seriously that we like literally have a physical distance in our building from it. I think what maybe makes this complicated that at one point in time, people knew where the difference lied when it was presented to them. So let me show you the front page of the Times really quick. So this is the front page of the New York Times from Tuesday's paper. As you can see on the top right-hand side, you have this story about the Republican health insurance plan, and our headline, says 24 million more among uninsured under DOP plan. We considered that our top story of the day, so we put the headline in really big type. It's at the top where the reader can see it. So, I'm not sure how many of you read newspapers, whether that's like ever or as of recently, a week ago, but this helps narrow it down a lot. It signals to people what is news. And you have like these big images too. We try to show that this particular story is important because it also has a photo with it, or that we sort of rank things, I think, in order of importance on our newspaper front is basically what I'm trying to tell you. So this sort of thing kind of exists online when you see our homepage, nytimes.com. But if you were to drop into the article, from a text message someone sent you, or a post, or if you were to do a Google search, then you just see the article. It's not in context with everything else like you would see on the front page of a newspaper. So this is why it's important for you guys to become media savvy and understand the differences. But it's also important for us to tell you what the differences are as much as possible with the way our headline is written, with the photos we have on the top, with any other multimedia elements we have in there. So, finally, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why it's important to be credible and reliable, and why it's important to find the truth and tell it. When the President of the United States declares that the New York Times are promoters of fake news, it's a statement that the American people will read and weigh whether there is truth to this or not. This is a statement from the leader of the free world, and therefore I absolutely expect no one to take it lightly. I don't expect them to take it as a flip comment. I expect them to weigh it with full seriousness. With that being said, this is what I can tell you. Our mission is to always tell the truth. We're accountable to you, the readers, and no one else. We have no agenda. We don't have anyone telling us what to write, except maybe our editors, if you're a reporter, of course. But that's it. We have hundreds of reporters scattered across the globe whose only mission is to tell the truth, report stories to their fullest extent with the facts that we uncover. So I urge you to read our stories and go beyond the headline. So remember earlier when I talked about how one of the things I do is think about what the headline should be? That's one of the reasons, probably the biggest reason why I do it. So you can be convinced enough to click on the article and get the entire report. You can become informed and you can make your own judgment. Our responsibility lies with giving you the facts and the truth as we understand it. Beyond that, it's also incumbent upon us as consumers of news to read different versions of the news. Read the Washington Post, that's one of our big competitors. Read the Wall Street Journal. Read your local newspaper, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Please read your local newspaper. My job before I came to the Times was at the Austin American-Statesman in Austin, Texas, and it was, there was no one else reporting the stories that we were reporting, and people at local newspapers work harder than any other journalist, I think, out there, so I will always sing their praises as having been a person who worked at a local news organization. Search and seek the truth. Think critically about where information comes from and try to learn the difference from what's real and what is not. Anyone can publish anything on the internet, and I'm very serious when I say this. I can go buy a domain, I can set up a blog, and I can become my own news organization if I really wanted to. But you also have to think about, what makes a news organization credible. You have to look at the websites you visit. You have to think about the links that are sent to you. When was it published? Who published it? Are the photos real? Did you see it on other sites? Is it too crazy to be true? It might be. As long as you are asking yourself those questions and finding the answers, I trust that you will find the truth. So there's one last point on this that I want to make, and I've talked a lot about how you have to find the truth. And I also have to point out about how you have to see us as trustworthy, as credible, and reliable to begin with in order for you to trust us. So recent polling, I believe it was the Quinnipiac poll that came out recently, found that 15% of conservative readers just do not trust the media. They do not believe that what we report is the truth. So, part of that comes back on us too. Like, how can we fix that? I think one part of it is by owning our mistakes and correcting them as quickly as possible. We are humans and we make errors, but we're not above fixing what we may have published as incorrect, and we do that here at the New York Times. We think it's very important to be transparent. It's also about covering those communities who do not trust us. It's reporting all sides of the story and telling people where our information came from. We have to earn your trust, and that is the hard work we are doing every single day, and will continue to do so. So how important is it that we gain your trust and that students and teachers like yourselves know the truth? So we started this a subscription program where anyone can make a contribution to the New York Times, and we'll provide a digital subscription to public schools and students across the United States. One of our biggest contributions was for $1 million from an anonymous donor. There are a lot of people who care very deeply about the news and facts, and for you to know what those are. And that includes, this anonymous donor who's willing to give up $1 million to provide that funding for others who cannot pay for what we do. That's the editors and reporters at the Times. We care that you get these news and facts. That's me as one of those editors. That's me as an American who is deeply I see it as a patriotic duty to do what I do. So I want to close things a little bit here to tell you a bit about where I come from, in hopes that it provides some inspiration to believe in yourselves as students and hopefully future journalists, and to acknowledge the hard work that your teachers also put in. My parents are Mexican immigrants. My mom was one of 8 children. She had no more than a grade school education. My father's life was much the same. He grew up on an impoverished farm in southern Mexico with 16 siblings. Yep, 16. There were a lot of them. My father's education was as short-lived as my mother's, but they were both, ambitious and they hungered for more. Their official education may have ended very early, but it never really stopped, I think, in other respects, that is. They each came to America as undocumented immigrants, nothing but dreams for a better life. And they did their best to build that life, working multiple jobs, long hours. My mom was a seamstress, a housekeeper, she was a home health aide before she passed away 3 years ago. My father worked as a dishwasher, he worked all these other odd jobs before going into construction. He now owns his own business and he's had a lot of success since then. But those were all hard jobs and they were sometimes thankless jobs. But I think because my parents didn't have a traditional education, they really wanted to make sure that me and my siblings did. So trips to the library were a regular part of our life. Secondhand books filled the shelves that my sister, in the room that my sister and I shared. My mom would often bring home newspapers from work and she would have us read them, and then we had to translate them to her to explain to her what the story was about. I think she always knew how important it was that we know what was happening in the world, because her immigrant experience, she wanted to know what was happening in America and Mexico, and even the Middle East. My oldest brother served in the U.S. Navy during the Gulf War, so of course she wanted to stay updated on what was happening there. All of those experiences, it's probably one of the reasons I learned English so quickly. Spanish was my first language. So her making me translate and a lot of Sesame Street growing up. So my parents never made me feel that I couldn't do something. Nothing was impossible. And I think it was because they overcame so much. They made it their own way, so why couldn't we? And why couldn't we achieve even more? My parents are some of the hardest working people I will ever know. I'd also like to think that my teachers were able to see that drive that my parents instilled in me, and they helped nurture my love of reading and writing. And I remember as the internet emerged into this medium of communication, I was just like totally enthralled by it and what was possible with it. I still remember learning my first lines of code, as nerdy as that sounds, but I think it was when I realized that I could put all these things together, my love of learning, reading, writing, and technology, that I knew I found what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was the editor of my college newspaper. Since then, I've been in the White House. I've interviewed celebrities and politicians. I've covered presidential campaigns. And now I work for the New York Times. It's an organization I'm incredibly proud to be a part of. My colleagues never fail to amaze me with their hard work and dedication to telling the truth and to making sure our readers have all the information they need to make sense of the world we live in. All of these are dreams that I never thought I would have, dreams that I never knew I could reach for if it weren't for my parents and teachers. They're dreams that are reality. But it was because I had so many people believe in me and so many people that were determined to help me succeed. The very least I can do is pay it forward. So I'm here to tell you that you can do whatever you set your mind to. If someone believes in you, they will help you achieve your dreams. What's more is places like the Times, and in order for us to be successful, we need people who come from different experiences, different parts of the country and different parts of the world, not just, New York City. Whether you're a boy, a girl, black, white, Asian, Hispanic like me, whether your family is conservative or liberal, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian, whatever way you identify, we need reporters and editors, in the broadest sense of those roles as I've defined them, to help tell the different stories about the different people who inhabit not just America, but really the world. If you're determined to work hard, it could be you here. It could be you up here. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to get myself connected back so that we can do some Q&A. So here's how we're going to do this. My phone's going to come out to the audience, and using my phone, you'll be able to then, if you have some questions for Myra, ask her your question. Oops.